How did MCX get started, and what's your background?
I was actually stimulated to go into business because when I was 8 years old, my father opened a grocery store, and I learned the grocery business from him. Worked until I was 17 and went off to college. Went to Fordham University in New York City, obtained a degree in business management, and spent 11 years in corporate America working for two large consumer products companies. I worked in the corporate headquarters on brand management for consumer products, and I was also a district and regional sales manager. After 11 years in corporate America, I did a career change and went into financial services. And for that length of time, I worked a contract with the city of Atlanta, the major county, and the transit system for deferred compensation for all of their employees. Over that 10-year period, I morphed into full service brokerage and ran a brokerage firm for 3 years. At the end of that period, I was a little burned out and wanted to make a career change. And one client that I first met when he was a law clerk in the county, 10 years later, he was general counsel at the EPA, and we were having lunch and discussing our personal plans and financial plans. And I mentioned to him that I was going to make a career change, and he suggested that I look at cleaning up Superfund waste sites, which something I hadn't considered and didn't know a great deal about. However, after doing research, it really struck me as an area that had to be addressed because I found out how polluted the air, soil, and water of the planet actually has become. Part of that investigation led me to come to understand what the impact has been from chemical fertilizers. If you take 1 acre of land, 12 inches deep, that has never had chemical fertilizers on it, you will find an ecosystem of bugs, worms, and nematodes and other creatures that would weigh as much as two large horses. After applying chemical fertilizers, in 36 months there's no life in the soil. However, the challenge doesn't stop there. The chemicals leach into the aquifers and poison our groundwater. They run off into the streams and rivers. In fact, the Mississippi River in the United States, which is somewhat of the backbone of the country that empties into the Gulf of Mexico right at New Orleans, Louisiana, in 1988 had a dead zone that was 35 square miles. In 2015, that dead zone, and when we say dead zone, we mean nothing lives there. Even the creatures like lobsters and shrimp won't go there. It suffocates the oxygen in the water. However, in 2015, that dead zone had grown to be over 8,500 square miles, larger than the state of New Jersey.
What was your focus initially?
The focus was on anaerobic digestion to produce fuel. Anaerobic digestion means this. Anaerobic simply means without air, so you're digesting a biomass, meaning anything from living matter, to be able to convert it into a gas. So, what is very attractive about anaerobic digestion is that it's low tech and it has a very long track record. There are records of it being used in Africa and China over 2,500 years ago. So, the procedure is fairly simple. You feed a digester, which is built out of concrete or steel, with biomass, anything from living matter. It could be trees that you dedicate for it, it could be crop debris, lawn clippings, tree trimmings, even the solids from a wastewater treatment plant are inputted into the digester. You add bacteria, seal it up, meaning without air, and in 30 days it'll produce methane gas. Now, we can utilize the gas in two methods. We can put it in turbines or generators to produce electricity, or we can compress it and utilize it to run vehicles. Example, in the United States you will see the UPS trucks, that's a major carrier, with a symbol on the back of their truck saying running on clean CNG, compressed natural gas. Well, methane is the component that gives it the energy. So what we have to offer, particularly for a developing nation, is to be able to use indigenous resources to produce energy. And then the great bonus from this is for every ton that you put in a digester, after you extract the gas, 7/10 of a ton remains, and that's organic fertilizer. Those two components go a long way to be able to use indigenous resources to produce energy and fertilizer for organic farming that can stimulate the economy and help move a developing nation towards an industrialized status.
Were there any other influences?
I actually consider serving on two nonprofit boards as very instrumental in expanding my concepts and contributing to the development of our model. One was South Face Energy Institute, which has been in Atlanta and promoting energy efficiency in buildings for over 40 years. In fact, the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED certified building program actually was birthed out of South Face Energy Institute. The second was serving on the board of the International Power Institute, or IPI, which was funded by the U.S. Department of Energy at Morehouse College for 2 years. In fact, in 1999, while on the board, I was invited to present a paper on anaerobic digestion to produce electricity at a power conference in South Africa. Interestingly, in preparing to make my presentation, I took a look at and had to answer the question, why are so many nations in debt in Africa? And when you look at imports and balance of payments, it comes down to 5 categories. 2 categories are always fossil fuels, which normally would be gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and chemicals, primarily chemical fertilizers. This is exactly what anaerobic digestion and the production of methane gas and organic fertilizers can help displace. And we can displace it with indigenous resources, which means that we're conserving capital for that nation, stimulating the economy, and being able to produce and make a contribution to expanding the economy.
What were your successes?
Our early successes came, first of all, in anaerobic digestion. As I mentioned earlier, we teamed up with Dr. Richard Glick, and we developed a system of growing a crop by the name Lucina, which is technically a legume, meaning that it extracts nitrogen from the atmosphere. This is an interesting crop/tree that grows 10 to 15 feet a year. What we did was we leased 200 acres of land from a phosphate mining operation in Polk County, Florida, which is about 35 miles east of Tampa. And for 4 years, we grew the Lucina tree, which grows 10 to 15 feet a year. We harvested in different fashions. We harvested by hand, we harvested mechanically. We actually survived and went through a drought season. We also had a bench scale digester available so that we could produce the gas and test the quality. So out of this, we created a model. And the model is this: 25,000 acres of land, and we selected that number because it's very close to the typical sugarcane plantation in many developing nations. If we perpetually grow and harvest the Lucina, we could produce about 60 megawatts of power, but very, very importantly, we would produce over 550,000 tons a year of organic fertilizer. So the development of our anaerobic digestion model, coupled with our experience in developing and installing microturbines, we installed microturbines at commercial applications, including a chain of furniture stores where we installed a turbine at their headquarters as a backup power system. And fortunately for that chain, one winter where we had an ice storm and took the grid out, we were able to continue the power generation for that headquarters, including their computer center, which allowed them to swipe cards at their stores across 12 states. Another type of application is that we installed some at chicken processing plants as a combined heat and power system, where we took the exhaust heat from the turbines, utilized that to produce hot water, steam, and air conditioning on site. And then finally, we had a number of successful applications where we installed the microturbines at various U.S. military installations around the country, and including Hawaii, to serve as a backup for their radar system.
What markets have been targeted moving forward?
We actually see that we have an application and a design system that's appropriate for global installations. However, our concentration over the next 3 to 5 years will specifically be in Africa. Major reason is very easy to see. Only 20% of the population in Africa has access to power. For the most part, the greatest portion of power generated in Africa has been in one country, South Africa, which is probably the most industrialized nation on the continent along with Egypt. However, that does not limit us to Africa. The same application in our system can be applied in the Caribbean, North and South America, and Asia.
Why Africa?
Why Africa? Simple answer. The economics dictate that that's our next great growth market, very similar to what has occurred in Asia over the last 30 to 40 years. The industrialization of Africa, the number of people moving into the middle class, and the fact that only 20% of the people in Africa, a continent with 54 nations, only 20% of the people have access to power today. Then there are some extraneous reasons for it. Being an African American and having been able to benefit from living in America and realizing the advantages of an industrialized world, we want to extract the best of that and take it to Africa to help bring people into the 21st century.
Tell us about your team.
I'd be very happy to tell you about the people that are involved. First of all, everyone has a commitment to renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure development, and they know the reason for that. We live in a world today that's very challenged ecologically, and we have to do some things to make a contribution, particularly for those underdeveloped nations that are beginning to develop energy and infrastructure so that it's done the proper fashion. I'll call them contributors because they make such a powerful contribution based on their backgrounds. We have one board member who was the president of a major Canadian bank in Africa, 3 different countries, Nigeria, Botswana, and Uganda. We have another board member who was the president of a large US-based mutual fund. In addition, he had been a bank examiner and has lived on the continent for over 20 years, has mentored a great number of people who now hold positions such as ministers of finance or entrepreneurs or major captains of industry. A third member of the team, who's a major contributor also, is an individual who currently holds the title of Entrepreneur in Residence at one of this country's leading technical universities. Prior to that, he spent years in industry in the UK and the US in jet engine and power generation technology. He's also been a manager and contributor to venture funds and brings a strong track record of already having successfully made a contribution to developing 5 other companies. Our CFO is a talented individual who spent about 20 years with the largest utility in Africa. We also have some other team members. We have an intern who has just recently morphed into being a full-time engineer. Once again, graduate of a major technical university here in the US and originally from China. We have some consultants that we work with. One is a associate professor of power generation focusing on solar at a technical university. Another contributor, also a consultant, is probably the world's foremost expert on microgrids for Africa.
How will you finance projects?
Our immediate objective over the next few months is to create our own renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure fund. What will be unique about the fund is that we will be able to develop and build projects without debt. That is, we will take the project fund, develop it in terms of securing the power purchase agreement, all the permitting, bringing in an EPC contractor who will build the project for us and guarantee its performance, and then we will do the operation and maintenance, which includes the fiduciary capacity of being able to do audits and have legal assessments of our projects. However, the structure of our financing is very unique. Because we will not have debt on the projects, all investors, primarily institutions and high net worth individuals, we will be able to answer their first question very quickly and very easily. When do I get my money back? Here's the structure. 90% of cash flow, once our projects are completed, will go back to the investors until they recoup their principal. 80% of cash flow will go to the investors until they realize 125% of their principal. 70% of cash flow will be returned to the investors until they reach 150% of their investment, and then a 50-50 split with MCX thereafter. We think that this structure for project financing has a number of benefits. Number one, we reduce debt. Number two, we become impervious to economic downturns because we don't have a debt obligation to meet. With that as a backdrop, we think that we're not only making a contribution to stability, but we're also making a contribution to being able to maintain cash flow over a long period of time.
What's behind the name MCX?
When I first came across anaerobic digestion, one of my first thoughts went back to high school physics, where we were taught that only energy and matter exist. We don't make any new, we just convert it back and forth. Thus the idea, when you put solids into a digester and they're converted to gas, that's the matter conversion. So the MC in our company names is referencing the matter being converted. We added an X to it because when we started the company, we thought that there are many, many things that we have yet to discover and realize that will be a part of our model, which has proven to be true after about 19 years now. So MCX is a dedication to the basics of physics and in terms of the basics of sustainability and renewable energy in a world that badly needs it.
What are your 2018 goals?
Our goals for 2018 are very simple, twofold. One, bring the right people into the organization who will allow us to develop and direct our activities in terms of renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. Goal number two is to raise $500 million in capital. $500 million to some may seem like a large amount. However, compared to the need for Africa for the next 30 years, which is estimated at $1.7 trillion, it's really just the starting point. However, this will allow us to engage and become developers in the marketplace, gain a reputation, make a contribution to renewables and sustainability, and also to economic development. Because part of our mission is to be able to stimulate in each country we go into the basics of economics. That is to bring people into employment, help the circulation of capital in that economy, and assist it in growing in a sustainable and environmentally friendly fashion. Thanks for listening, and we will update you from time to time as we make progress and are looking forward to sending out a significant number of project successes over the next few months. Thank you.